The mining colony on the edge of the Red Desert was quiet that night. The only sounds came from the heavy drills far away, digging into stone for ore. Most of the people stayed inside their shelters because they had heard the rumors. Something large had fallen near the canyon, and the ground had shaken when it landed. Some said it was a meteor. Others whispered it was a creature. Mara, a young mechanic, had no time for rumors. She worked late hours fixing the defense turrets that circled the colony. They were old machines, patched together many times, and she was one of the few who still knew how to keep them running. She preferred the company of tools over people. Metal, at least, was honest. That night she carried a small lantern and a toolbox to the western edge of the colony. A turret had gone silent earlier in the day, and she was sent to repair it. The wind carried sand against her boots as she walked along the rocky path. The air smelled of iron, sharp and dry. When she reached the broken turret, she crouched down and opened its panel. Wires were burnt, and the power cell was cracked. She sighed and set her lantern on the ground. She pulled out a fresh coil of wire, but before she began, she noticed something strange. The air around her carried a low sound, almost like breathing. She froze. The sound was not from the machine. It came from beyond the rocks, down the slope that led to the canyon floor. Slowly, Mara lifted her lantern and stepped forward. Her heart pounded, but her hands did not shake. Curiosity had always been stronger in her than fear. She climbed over a ridge of stone, and what she saw made her stop. Lying across the canyon floor was a massive shape, dark against the sand. Wings, torn and folded, stretched wider than any ship she had seen. Scales glimmered faintly in the lantern light, though many were dull and cracked. The creature's chest rose and fell with slow, heavy breaths. It was a dragon. Mara had heard stories of them before. Ancient protectors, some said. Others believed they were dangerous beasts that once battled starships in forgotten wars. But she had never thought she would see one. The dragon's body was marked with strange black scars. They spread like cracks in metal, crawling across his glowing scales. The wounds looked alive, as if they were eating away at him. Mara realized this must be the rot the miners whispered about, a sickness that no healer could cure. Her first thought was to run back to the colony. Yet something stopped her. Near the dragon's great chest, she saw movement. A smaller figure pressed close against his side. At first she thought it was another wound, but then she realized it was a hatchling. The little one had bright eyes that shone in the dark, and its small wings shook as it breathed. It looked frightened, yet it did not leave its parent. Instead, it gave a soft cry, like the sound of metal bending under weight. Mara's chest tightened. She knew what fear and loneliness felt like. She could not just walk away. She stepped closer, holding up her lantern. The dragon's eyes opened slowly. They were golden, but weak, as if a fire inside was fading. He did not move to strike her, only watched. His voice was a deep whisper, broken by pain. "Human, leave this place." "The rot spreads," Mara shook her head. "I can't." "You're hurt. And your little one," she glanced at the hatchling, who stared at her with wide eyes. "He needs you." The dragon closed his eyes again, as if even speaking had drained his strength. The hatchling made a small sound and stumbled toward Mara, wings dragging against the sand. It stopped a few steps away, studying her. Mara knelt down, setting her lantern beside her. Slowly, she reached out a hand, not to touch but to show she meant no harm. "It's all right," she whispered. "I won't hurt you." The hatchling tilted its head, then stepped closer. Its nose brushed the edge of her glove, warm and trembling. Mara felt something stir inside her, an old memory of when she was a child, lost in the scrapyard, and her father had come to find her. Safety in the middle of fear. She looked back at the dragon. His breaths were shallower now. The black scars spread across his side, and she could almost hear them crackle. The colony leaders would never allow her to bring him help. They feared dragons, and they feared sickness more. If she reported this, they would order her to stay away. They might even try to kill the creature. But as the hatchling pressed close to her, Mara made a quiet choice. She would not leave them. She was only a mechanic, not a healer, not a soldier, but she had spent her life fixing broken machines. Perhaps she could fix this too. She picked up her lantern and toolbox. "I'll help you," she whispered to the dragon and the hatchling. "I don't know how yet, but I'll try." The dragon did not answer, but one golden eye opened halfway, and for a moment it seemed to her that he understood. Mara turned back toward the colony. She would need supplies, tools, and maybe even power cells if she was to build something useful. The night was silent again, but her heart was not. She carried a promise now, heavier than any machine she had ever lifted. And she knew there was no turning back. Mara returned to the colony before sunrise. The sky was still dark, only a faint red line showing at the horizon. She walked fast, carrying her lantern low, hoping no one would see her face. Her boots were heavy with sand, and her mind was even heavier with the promise she had made. Inside the colony gates, she went straight to her workshop. The room was filled with broken parts, old engines, and half-finished machines. She shut the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, breathing hard. The image of the dragon's golden eye and the hatchling's trembling wings stayed clear in her mind. She lit the overhead lamp and began pulling tools from shelves. Wrenches, wire, old power cells, and coils of tubing, everything she thought she might need. She did not know how to heal a dragon, but she knew machines. The rot looked like corruption spreading through metal, like rust that ate away at strength. If she could build something to fight rust, maybe it could fight the sickness too. But as she worked, she heard a knock on the door. Mara stiffened. Few people visited her workshop at this hour. She set her tools aside and opened the door slightly. It was Darren, one of the colony guards. His armor was scratched, his face tired. "You were seen near the canyon last night," he said. "What were you doing there?" Mara forced her voice to stay calm. "Repairing a turret. You know they break down every other day." Darren studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Be careful. Something landed out there. Some say it's dangerous. The council will send scouts soon." Her stomach tightened. If the council found the dragon, they would not try to help. They would fear him, and they would fear the rot. She forced a smile. "I'll keep to my work." When Darren left, she shut the door and pressed her hands against the table. Time was shorter than she thought. She had to act before the council discovered the truth. For hours, she worked in silence. Sparks lit the room as she welded pieces together. She built a small frame, fitted it with tubes, and connected it to a power cell. Slowly, the shape of a purifier began to take form. It was rough and heavy, but she believed it could send clean energy through anything it touched. Maybe it could burn away the rot's corruption. By evening, her hands were blistered and her eyes heavy. She strapped the device to her back and left the workshop quietly. She took the path toward the canyon again, moving under the cover of twilight. When she reached the ridge, the dragon was still there. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his body looked weaker. The black scars had spread further. The hatchling cried softly, pressing against his parents' side. Mara set down her pack and approached carefully. The hatchling saw her first and ran toward her on shaky legs. It chirped in a high sound and brushed its nose against her arm. Mara knelt and touched its head gently. "I'm back. I promised, didn't I?" The dragon opened his eyes halfway. His voice was faint but clear enough. "Why do you return, human? The rot will claim me. It may claim you as well." Mara placed her toolbox beside him. "Because your hatchling needs you. And because I don't leave things broken if I can fix them. I'll try, even if others won't." The dragon studied her, his golden eyes dim but thoughtful. At last, he gave a slow nod. "You are strange, but I will not stop you." Mara began setting up the purifier. She connected wires, checked the tubes, and attached the power cell. The hatchling watched with bright eyes, tilting its head as if trying to copy her movements. It picked up a small piece of wire in its mouth and dropped it near her hand. Mara smiled despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, little one. You're already my helper." When the machine was ready, she pressed a button. The purifier hummed and sent a low glow of blue light through the tubes. Mara held the device close to one of the rot scars on the dragon's scales. The black mark pulsed, fighting against the light. For a moment, the glow pushed it back, and the scales beneath shone brighter. The dragon groaned softly, but it was not a sound of pain. "The burning is strange, but there is relief as well." Encouraged, Mara kept the purifier steady. She moved it along the scars, watching as small patches of darkness faded. But after a few minutes, the power cell began to dim. The light flickered and then shut down. The purifier went silent. Mara cursed under her breath. She had known it was only a test, but seeing the light fade filled her with frustration. She dropped to her knees, breathing hard. It worked, but not enough. "I need stronger cells. More power." The dragon lowered his head, his golden eyes fixed on her. "You fight with the hands of a maker, not a warrior. Yet you bring hope where I thought none remained." The hatchling curled against Mara's side, as if sensing her weariness. She touched its warm scales gently. "I'll find a way. I promise both of you. I won't stop." The dragon closed his eyes again, but this time his breathing was steadier, as if the brief touch of the purifier had given him strength. Mara sat beside the hatchling, staring at the stars above. She knew the colony would soon notice her absences. She knew the council might discover what she was doing. But she also knew she could not turn back. She had given her word. And Mara never broke a promise. The days that followed turned into a quiet pattern. Mara would spend her mornings at the colony, fixing machines and pretending nothing was unusual. At night, she carried her tools and her purifier to the canyon where the dragon and his hatchling waited. Every time she used the purifier, the dragon's pain eased a little. The black scars shrank, glowing scales returned in patches, and his breathing grew stronger. Yet the rot always crept back. The purifier could fight it, but it could not stop it completely. Mara felt both pride and frustration. She was proud her machine worked at all, but she hated that it was not enough. She was a mechanic. She wanted things fixed, not half-fixed. The hatchling, whom she had started calling Elio, followed her everywhere when she visited. He was small but curious, always watching her hands as she worked. Sometimes he tried to help, nudging parts toward her with his nose or gripping wires in his tiny claws. Once he even tried to carry her wrench, though it was almost too heavy for him. Mara laughed and patted his head. "Careful, Elio. You'll be stronger than me soon." The dragon, whose name she finally learned was Rovan, spoke more now that he had regained some strength. His voice was deep, like stone shifting under pressure, but gentler than she expected. "You speak to my child as if he were your own," Rovan said one night, watching her share a piece of dried fruit with Elio. Mara smiled faintly. "He reminds me of myself when I was young. Always curious. Always climbing where I shouldn't. My father used to say I was more trouble than a broken engine." Rovan rumbled with a sound that might have been laughter. "Then perhaps Elio will grow strong because of that same fire." But the warmth in their talks was always shadowed by the truth. One evening, after another round with the purifier, Rovan's golden eyes fixed on Mara with unusual sharpness. "You must know, mechanic," he said, "the rot does not begin here. It is not sickness born of earth or sky. It came from a weapon. A weapon older than your colony, older than the miners who built this place." Mara frowned, wiping sweat from her forehead. "A weapon? What kind?" "Long ago," Rovan said, "ships from beyond this sector fought with crystals that poisoned life itself. The rot is the echo of that war. I felt it sting while crossing the stars. Now it spreads inside me." Mara's chest tightened. If the source still existed, then no purifier would ever be enough. She thought of rust again. Cleaning rust from a machine meant nothing if water still dripped onto it. She had to stop the cause, not just fight the effect. "Where is it?" she asked quietly. Rovan's head lowered, his eyes dim. "In the asteroid fields beyond this world. I sensed it once before I fell. A shard of that weapon still breathes there. Until it is destroyed, the rot will return." Mara looked at her purifier, then at her hands. The idea of leaving the colony, flying into dangerous fields of stone and wreckage, felt impossible. She was no pilot. She was no soldier. But when she looked at Elio, playing with a loose bolt near her boot, she knew she could not ignore it. She reached out and touched the hatchling's warm scales. "Then I'll find it. I'll break it. I promise." Rovan's gaze softened. "You carry the spirit of your kind. Always fixing, always fighting what others fear. Perhaps it is enough." The next day, Mara began preparing a shuttle. She found an old mining craft sitting in the repair bay, unused for months. It was slow and worn, but its engines still had life. She spent hours patching its hull, replacing broken wires, and feeding power into its rusty circuits. The other mechanics teased her. "Why waste time on that scrap?" one asked. Mara only shrugged. "Because even scrap can fly if you give it a chance." At night, she told Rovan her plan. "The shuttle isn't perfect, but it'll hold together long enough. I'll take the purifier and see if I can overload it to destroy that shard." Elio chirped and flapped his small wings as if in excitement. When Mara tried to explain he should stay with his father, the hatchling shook his head and clung to her arm. "He will not be parted from you," Rovan said. "You have become part of his flight. Perhaps it is fate." Mara sighed but smiled at Elio. "All right, then. But you'll have to be brave. No biting wires when I'm flying." That night, as stars spread across the sky, Mara sat with Elio resting beside her. She looked at her calloused hands and the purifier strapped at her side. For the first time in years, she felt she was doing more than fixing machines. She was protecting something precious. Yet in the back of her mind, fear whispered. The asteroid fields were dangerous, full of raiders and wreckage. She might never return. But she pushed the thought aside. She had made a promise. And Mara had learned that promises, once given, could not be broken. The mining shuttle groaned when Mara powered it up. Its engines coughed with smoke before settling into a shaky hum. The lights inside flickered, and the control panels looked as old as the colony itself. But Mara's hands were steady as she adjusted the wires she had patched together. She trusted her work, even if the shuttle was fragile. Lio sat in the co-pilot's seat, his small claws tapping against the armrest. His wings twitched with excitement. He had never left the canyon before, and his eyes glowed bright at the sight of the shuttle's blinking lights. Mara strapped herself in and glanced at him. "You're sure you want to come?" she asked. Lio tilted his head and chirped, a sound that was firm for such a small voice. Mara sighed and smiled. "All right, then. But no chewing on the wires. This ship barely holds together as it is." With a final deep breath, she pulled the throttle. The shuttle lifted, shaking as if it might fall apart. Dust rose from the ground, and then the small craft pushed upward through the thin clouds. The colony shrank behind them, a cluster of metal domes glowing in the desert night. As the stars spread wide, Mara felt a thrill of fear and wonder. She had rarely left the planet, and now she was flying straight into the asteroid fields known as the Forbidden Sector. Few ships dared to go there. Raiders hid in the rocks, and wreckage from past battles drifted endlessly. But that was where the source of the rot waited, and Mara could not turn back. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the steady hum of the engines. Lio sat close, sometimes pressing his head against Mara's arm. She found comfort in his warmth. Though she was only one human in a weak ship, she no longer felt alone. The asteroids came into view like dark mountains floating in space. Some spun slowly, others clashed together, leaving trails of dust. The shuttle trembled as Mara guided it through narrow gaps. Sparks of light flashed when rocks scraped the hull. "Hold steady," Mara muttered to herself, gripping the controls tight. She had repaired this ship with her own hands. She would not let it fail her now. Suddenly, alarms blared. The radar showed moving signals ships. Mara's heart dropped. Raiders. 3 small crafts appeared from behind an asteroid, their engines glowing red. They moved like hunters circling prey. Mara knew her shuttle had no weapons strong enough to fight them. She cursed under her breath and pushed the throttle, weaving between spinning rocks. The raiders followed, firing bursts of energy that lit up the darkness. The shuttle shook as blasts struck the hull. Metal groaned, but it held. Mara's eyes darted across the control panels, searching for an escape path. Lio let out a sharp cry. His small body trembled, but instead of hiding, he scrambled to the viewport. His chest glowed faintly, and with a sudden roar far bigger than his size, he breathed a burst of fire. The flame shot across the window and caught one of the raider ships by surprise. It swerved, its wings scorched. Mara stared for a moment, then grinned. "Good work, Lio. Let's see if we can scare them off." With new courage, she steered the shuttle toward a cluster of tight asteroids. The raiders gave chase, but Mara used every trick she knew, cutting power for sharp turns, sliding between rocks, and letting the asteroids shield her from fire. Lio roared again, his flames flashing through the dark, and the raiders hesitated. One ship clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. The others pulled back, unwilling to risk more in the dangerous field. Within moments, they were gone. Mara slumped in her seat, her hands shaking. The shuttle was battered, but still flying. She looked at Elio, who was panting, smoke curling from his nose. She placed a hand on his head. "You're braver than I thought. You saved us." The hatchling chirped proudly, then curled against the seat as if the effort had drained him. Mara smiled, but her eyes hardened as she looked ahead. The danger was only beginning. Deeper in the asteroid field, she found wreckage. Broken ships floated silently, their hulls twisted by old battles. The sight chilled her. Rovan had been right, the war that created the rot had left scars across the stars. Finally, the radar showed something different. A faint pulse, slow but strong, like a heartbeat. Mara followed it through the rocks until she saw it. On a dead asteroid, half buried in stone, stood the remains of a massive warship. Its hull was cracked open, and inside, a crystal glowed with sickly green light. It pulsed, sending waves through the air that made Mara's skin crawl. Even from the shuttle, she could feel its poison. Elio hissed softly, his wings folding tight against his body. He sensed it too. Mara tightened her grip on the controls. "That's it? That's the source." She guided the shuttle toward the wreck, landing on the rough surface. Dust rose around the craft as it touched down. She unstrapped herself, picked up the purifier, and slung it over her shoulder. She looked at Elio. "This is going to be dangerous," she said softly. "But if we don't stop it, your father will never heal." The hatchling pressed his head against her hand, a silent answer. Mara stepped out of the shuttle, boots crunching against stone. The wreck of the warship loomed before her, its broken walls glowing faintly with the crystal's light. The air buzzed with a low hum that made her teeth ache. She took a deep breath. Her journey had brought her here. Now she had to finish it. The wrecked warship stood like a broken skeleton across the dead asteroid. Its hull was torn open, jagged edges pointing toward the sky. The faint green glow of the crystal pulsed deep inside, spilling across the shadows like poison light. Mara felt her chest tighten just looking at it. Her purifier, strapped to her back, hummed faintly as if reacting to the energy ahead. Elio stayed close to her side, his small claws clicking on the stone floor as they stepped inside. The air inside the wreck was dry, yet heavy, as though something unseen pressed down on them. Rusted wires hung like vines from the ceiling, and broken panels sparked weakly even after centuries. Mara kept her lantern raised. "Stay close, Elio. We don't know what's waiting for us." The hatchling chirped softly but walked bravely beside her. His golden eyes reflected the sickly green glow as they moved deeper into the wreck. The crystal revealed itself in the heart of the warship. It was massive, almost as tall as the shuttle outside, and embedded in twisted metal. Its surface pulsed with cracks of green light that spread like veins. Every pulse sent a low vibration through the floor, like the heartbeat of a living thing. Mara felt sweat on her forehead. Her purifier had been built to push back small traces of the rot, not to face its source directly. But she had no choice. She had promised Rovan and Elio that she would not give up. She set her toolbox down and pulled the purifier forward. She adjusted its tubes, connected wires, and tightened the straps. "If I overload it," she muttered, mostly to herself, "it should be enough to break the crystal. The ship won't survive the blast, but maybe we will." Lio tilted his head and let out a questioning chirp. Mara smiled faintly and brushed her hand along his scales. Don't worry. I'll make it work. I always do. She lifted the purifier and pointed its glowing coil toward the crystal. The device whined as she pushed the power higher than it was built for. Blue light poured into the crystal, colliding with the sickly green. For a moment, the crystal flickered, its pulse weakening. Then the ground shook. From the shadows, movement stirred. Figures crawled out of broken passageways, machines, but not whole. Their bodies were twisted, fused with fragments of crystal. They looked like old war drones, but their eyes glowed the same green as the rot. Their movements were jerky, yet filled with purpose. They were guardians, still serving the weapon that had corrupted them. Mara's stomach dropped. Of course it couldn't be that easy. The nearest drone lunged forward, its claws raised. Lio leapt in front of Mara, his small body blazing with sudden fire. He breathed a burst of flame, catching the machine across its chest. The drone screeched and stumbled back, its wires melting. More drones followed, climbing across walls and broken beams. Mara grabbed a wrench from her belt and swung it hard against one that came too close. Sparks flew as the strike knocked its head sideways. Hold them off, Lio, she shouted, turning back to the purifier. She forced more power into the coil, watching as the light grew brighter. The crystal fought back, its green glow pulsing harder, sending waves of pressure through the air that nearly knocked her down. Lio fought with fierce determination, small but strong. He darted between drones, breathing fire, his wings snapping to keep his balance. Mara used whatever tools she had, wrenches, hammers, even sparks from loose wires to drive back any drone that broke through. But the purifier strained. Warning lights flashed across its side. It was not built to handle this much power for long. Mara gritted her teeth, holding it steady. You're going to hold, she whispered. You have to. One drone crashed through a wall and charged directly at her. Mara raised her arms, but before it struck, Lio slammed into its side, knocking it off course. The hatchling roared, fire spilling from his mouth. Mara's chest ached with pride. He was still small, but his courage was greater than any warrior she had ever seen. The purifier screamed with energy, its glow so bright it lit the entire chamber. The crystal cracked, thin lines spreading across its surface. Green light spilled from the cracks, chaotic and violent. Mara braced herself. Almost there. Just a little more. The drones suddenly froze, their glowing eyes flickering. They seemed to sense what was coming. Some collapsed, their corrupted power failing. Others tried one last charge, but Mara swung her wrench with desperate strength, knocking them aside. Lio leapt on another, tearing at its wires with his claws. A final crack split the crystal. The green light flared like lightning. Mara screamed as the purifier jolted in her hands. She shoved it forward, forcing the last surge of power into the heart of the crystal. With a sound like glass shattering, the crystal burst apart. A shock wave of light swept through the wreck, tearing through the drones, ripping the rot from the walls. The chamber shook as pieces of the ship collapsed around them. Mara grabbed Lio and pulled him close, shielding him with her body as debris rained down. The purifier sparked one last time and went silent, smoking in her hands. When the light faded, the crystal was gone. Only fragments remained, dull and harmless. The green glow had vanished. The rot source had been destroyed. Mara collapsed to her knees, holding Lio tight. Both of them were shaking, covered in dust, but alive. She lifted her head and whispered, "We did it." Lio chirped softly, pressing his nose against her cheek. His small wings wrapped around her as if to say the same. But as Mara looked at the wreck around them, she knew they were not safe yet. The asteroid field was still dangerous, and the shuttle had to survive the trip back. And beyond that, Rovan was still waiting. The shuttle trembled as Mara lifted off from the ruined warship. Dust and debris from the collapsing wreck whipped past the cockpit, scratching the metal. The engines strained under the effort, sparks flying from a damaged thruster. Mara gritted her teeth and focused. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong turn, and they could be trapped among the spinning asteroids forever. Lio clung to her arm, his wings folded tightly against his small body. He let out a low chirp that sounded more worried than brave. Mara reached over and stroked his head. "We're almost through, Lio. Just a little longer." The radar flashed red. More debris drifted ahead, larger this time, moving fast. Mara twisted the controls, dodging a jagged rock barely 10 meters away. The shuttle shook violently, throwing her against the seat harness. Sparks flew from a control panel, and one wire snapped, sending a shower of blue light across the cockpit. "Not now," she muttered, quickly reconnecting the wire. The shuttle groaned under the strain. She knew it could break apart at any moment, but turning back was not an option. Rovan's life depended on her returning with the purifier still working. Lio watched every move, his small claws gripping the console. Mara smiled faintly despite the tension. "See, even you are learning, little one. Keep watching and helping me." They passed through the narrowest part of the asteroid field, rocks spinning dangerously close. Mara's hands moved with precision, adjusting thrusters and dodging obstacles by centimeters. One sharp turn sent the shuttle scraping a rock, tearing part of the hull. The metal screeched, but it held. She exhaled slowly. Then the unexpected happened. One of the engines faltered completely, sparks flying from the exposed wires. The shuttle pitched forward, heading straight for a cluster of asteroids. Mara's heart raced. She slammed the controls back, twisting and firing the remaining thrusters in a desperate attempt to stabilize the craft. Lio cried out, his small body tensing. Mara grabbed the purifier, holding it firmly against her chest. "Come on, old girl. Hold together." The shuttle shuddered violently, then slowly steadied. The engine groaned but survived. Mara exhaled, sweat dripping down her face. She glanced at Lio. His eyes were wide, but his chest glowed faintly with relief. Even in the middle of danger, he had not panicked. Hours passed as they navigated the remaining field. Mara checked the purifier constantly. The overload from the warship had left it weak. One more strike could destroy it, and with it, any hope of fully curing Rovan. She kept it stable, adjusting energy flow carefully while keeping the shuttle on course. Finally, the asteroids thinned. The edge of space opened, showing the colony below. The red desert stretched for miles, dotted with metal domes and mining machines. Mara exhaled a long breath. They had made it. The shuttle was battered, but alive. "Almost home, Lio," she whispered. "We can rest soon." The hatchling chirped softly, brushing against her arm. He had been through more than most dragons twice his age, yet he had shown courage and strength beyond what she had expected. Mara smiled faintly. "You'll make a fine protector one day." As they approached the colony, Mara thought about Rovan. The dragon had been weak when she first found him, and now, with the source of the rot destroyed, he had a chance to recover fully. She could almost see him rising, scales bright and strong, wings ready to soar again. The shuttle touched down with a heavy thud. Dust and sand swirled around them, but they were safe. Mara unstrapped herself, careful of the fragile purifier. Elio jumped out first, landing lightly and looking around with excitement. Mara followed, holding the device close. The colony was quiet. Most people were inside their homes, unaware of the battle fought in the asteroid field. Mara hoped no one would interfere before Rovan fully recovered. She set the purifier down gently and looked toward the canyon. "Come on, little one. Let's take this to him." Elio chirped and flapped his wings, hovering slightly before landing again. Together, they moved across the sand, leaving trails in the red dust. Mara carried the purifier, ready to help Rovan with the final cure. She could feel the pulse of hope growing stronger with each step. At the canyon, Rovan lay waiting. His golden eyes brightened when he saw them. The black scars had begun to fade, showing the early signs of healing. He moved slowly, but Mara could feel his strength returning. "You brought it back," he said, his deep voice filled with relief. "You kept your promise, human." Mara knelt beside him, placing the purifier near the largest remaining scar. Elio nudged her hand with his small nose, his warmth steadying her. "We did it together," she said softly. "Now let's finish the job." She activated the purifier carefully, sending a controlled pulse of energy into Rovan's side. The black scars shrank quickly under the blue glow, and his scales brightened. The dragon rumbled with relief, lifting his head higher than he had in weeks. Elio chirped joyfully, circling above her before landing beside Rovan. The bond between them was clear now. Mara felt a surge of pride and hope. Humanity's determination, her skill as a mechanic, and the courage of a young hatchling had restored life to a great dragon. Rovan slowly rose to his full height, wings stretching wide. The scars were almost gone. His golden eyes met Mara's, full of gratitude and trust. "You are more than a mechanic," he said. "You are a savior. You fight not just with hands, but with heart." Mara smiled, brushing Elio's head gently. "I only did what I promised," she said. "I never leave things broken if I can fix them." The dragon rumbled again, this time with a deep, steady strength. The rot was gone, and for the first time in months, he was whole. Mara stood and looked at the horizon. The colony was still small and fragile, but now, it had proved that even in the darkest danger, courage and skill could change the outcome. Humanity's spirit, she realized, was a force even stronger than the rot itself. And she had proven it. The canyon was quiet under the morning sun. The red dust settled over the ground, sparkling faintly in the early light. Mara stood beside Rovan, watching him stretch his massive wings. The dragon's scales shone in gold and bronze, free from the black scars of the rot. Elio chirped happily at his father's side, flapping his small wings in excitement. Rovan turned his great head to Mara. "You have given me a life I thought lost," he said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You risked everything for us." "Why?" Mara smiled softly, brushing Elio's head. "Because you are alive. Because the hatchling needs his father. And because I keep my promises. That is all." The dragon's golden eyes glimmered. "Your kind is strange. You do not fight for power or treasure. You fight because it is right. Perhaps that is why you succeed where others fail." Mara laughed quietly, a sound that mixed relief and disbelief. Maybe. Or maybe I just can't leave things broken. Rovan rumbled again, this time a sound that seemed like laughter. He lowered his head, touching Mara gently with the tip of his snout. You have done more than repair a life. You have restored hope. The colony had gathered nearby, drawn by the sound of Rovan's wings and the light of the rising sun. People watched in awe as the great dragon rose fully, towering above them, his scales bright and shining. The hatchling chirped proudly, perching on a small rock, watching Mara and Rovan together. The colony leaders approached cautiously. They had feared the dragon, feared the rot, and feared the unknown. But now, they could see what had been done. Mara, a single human among them, had healed a creature they thought untouchable. She had risked her life, faced unknown dangers, and returned victorious. One of the leaders, a tall man named Torin, stepped forward. Mara, we underestimated you, he said, his voice shaking slightly. You have saved more than a dragon. You have saved this colony. Mara shook her head. I didn't do it alone. The hatchling helped, and the dragon's courage helped. I only guided them. Elio chirped and fluttered down to Mara's shoulder. He pressed his small body against her, warm and trusting. Mara smiled, feeling the weight of their bond. This small creature had shown more bravery than anyone she had ever known. Together, they had faced death and danger, and together they had won. Rovan flexed his wings, lifting them high above the ground. The sunlight caught his scales, casting shimmering reflections across the canyon walls. Your kind is stronger than I imagined, he said. Perhaps this is what humanity has to offer the stars. Strength of heart, courage of will, and the skill to repair what others cannot. Mara felt pride swell in her chest. She had always thought of herself as a mechanic, a fixer of machines. But now she saw she had done more. She had mended a life, restored hope, and shown that even the smallest actions could change the course of the future. The hatchling, Elio, chirped again and nudged her hand. Mara laughed softly. All right, little one. Let's go home. Rovan lowered his head, allowing Mara and Elio to climb onto his back. His wings lifted slowly, and then with a powerful beat, they carried them into the sky. The canyon spread below them like a red ocean, the colony looking small and safe in the morning light. As they soared, Mara felt the wind on her face, the warmth of the sun, and the steady rhythm of Rovan's wings. Elio chirped happily beside her, eyes bright with wonder. She realized that she was not just a mechanic. She was a protector, a guide, and now a friend to creatures beyond her understanding. Rovan spoke softly as they flew. You have given more than I can say, human. You have given life and hope. Your courage will not be forgotten. Mara smiled, leaning against the dragon's warm scales. I don't need to be remembered. I just need to do what is right. The hatchling chirped in agreement, flapping his wings as Rovan turned gracefully in the sky. The three of them flew together, human and dragons, bound by trust, courage, and the promise they had kept. As they approached the edge of the colony, Mara knew that the story of the rod, the purifier, and their journey would be told for generations. Not because of the danger, but because of the strength of will and the determination to protect life. Humanity had reached out and shown that even one person could make a difference. Rovan lowered them gently to the canyon floor. Mara stepped down, holding Elio in her arms. The dragon knelt, lowering his massive head in respect. You are welcome here anytime, he said, his voice calm and full of warmth. Mara looked at the hatchling, then back at Rovan. Thank you, she whispered. We did it together. Elio chirped one last time, pressing against her cheek. Mara laughed softly, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. She had kept her promise, saved a life, and gained a bond stronger than any fear or danger. The colony began to stir, their eyes filled with awe and respect. Mara turned back toward the canyon, the place where her courage had been tested. She felt proud, strong, and hopeful. Humanity had once again proven its strength not through weapons or machines, but through heart, determination, and the will to protect life. Rovan rose fully, spreading his wings wide, and let out a powerful roar that echoed across the canyon. Elio chirped in response, and Mara smiled, knowing their journey had changed them all. The dragon was healed. The hatchling was safe. And Mara had fulfilled her last chance. They had succeeded, together. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across the red canyon. For Mara, Rovan, and Elio, the future was wide and full of possibilities, bound by courage, trust, and the unbroken promise they had shared. The adventure had ended, but the bond they had formed would last forever.